Praise the Lord and welcome to our explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really compelling, deeply personal story of grief, power, and ultimate forgiveness from the very final chapter of Genesis. We are looking at a narrative that wraps up one of the most famous biographies in ancient literature, the life of Joseph. If you've ever struggled with old family wounds, or maybe you've wondered how to navigate the incredibly complicated aftermath of losing a loved one, the historical account we're dissecting today is just so incredibly relevant to you right now. We are going to look closely at how a man who had literally every reason and every resource to exact terrible revenge chose a completely different path.
Okay, let's dive right in with a quote that basically frames our entire journey today. It perfectly captures that incredible, tense moment when Joseph holds the fate of his abusers right in the palm of his hands. This single sentence, it's the absolute hinge of the entire Genesis narrative. It's this profound realization that human malice and divine providence can actually operate on the exact same event. Think about it. Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery out of pure spite. Yet here, decades later, Joseph recognizes that the horrific hardship he endured was actually the vehicle used to save thousands of people from starvation. And our historical exploration today is grounded right at the end of the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 50, specifically using the English Standard Version. Everything we're covering is drawn directly from this text, starting from the heavy moment of Jacob's death, moving through a massive, sprawling state funeral, and finally ending with Joseph's own passing. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the great Egyptian funeral, look at the lingering guilt and fear of the brothers, see exactly how evil was transformed for good, explore Joseph's final legacy, and wrap it all up with 3 practical actions for today. Section 1. The Great Egyptian Funeral. Let's see how a patriarch's dying wish was honored. The text maps out an immense, staggering scale of grief. Honestly, it's a lot like the massive logistical protocols of a modern state funeral. It starts with such a raw human moment. Joseph, despite his immense power as the second in command of all of Egypt, falls on his deceased father's face, just weeping and kissing him. Then he commands his physicians to embalm his father, a very specific process taking exactly 40 days. But look at the national response. The Egyptians weep for Jacob for 70 days. To put that into perspective for a second, a 70-day mourning period was typically reserved for royalty, for a pharaoh. This just shows the immense respect Egypt had for Joseph, extending it all the way to his father. And finally, there's an intense 7-day period of mourning once they reach the border of Canaan. Imagine the sheer spectacle of this massive procession. You've got chariots, the elders of Egypt, Joseph's entire household, and military escorts traveling all the way to Canaan. It's a real-world example of honoring a dying wish, and it was so grand that the Canaanite locals actually permanently renamed the location. It was such a very great company, and their lamentation was so incredibly loud and grievous that the locals witnessed it and called the place Abel Mizraim, which literally translates to the mourning of Egypt. So the absolutely crucial point here is that Joseph kept his word. He buried his father in the specific tomb Abraham bought from Ephron the Hittite. Before he died, Jacob made Joseph swear an oath to take him out of Egypt and bury him in that family tomb. By pulling off this massive, multinational logistical challenge, Joseph honors his father's final earthly request. He places him right in the cave at Machpelah, east of Mamre. And this wasn't just about a burial. It was a profound statement of faith that their true home was the Promised Land, not the comfortable, wealthy plains of Egypt. All right, Section 2, Lingering Guilt and Fear. Let's step into the shadows of the past. So the funeral is over, the grand procession has returned to Egypt, and now a deep, dark anxiety creeps into the minds of the brothers. Without their father around to protect them, their panicked reaction is a powerful, real-world example of how deeply guilt lingers from past wrongs. They literally whisper to one another, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." Think about this. They have lived in absolute peace in Egypt for 17 whole years since the reunion. Yet, the very moment Jacob is gone, their guilt flares right back up. It's like waiting years for the other shoe to drop. Guilt really has a way of blinding us to the grace we've already been shown, doesn't it? Out of pure terror, they send a messenger with a supposed command from their dead father, eventually falling down as servants before Joseph. They construct this whole message saying Jacob wanted Joseph to forgive them. Then they physically show up, collapse before him, and declare, "Behold, we are your servants." The irony here is just staggering. Decades earlier, they sold him into slavery specifically to prevent his childhood dreams of them bowing to him from ever coming true. Now, driven entirely by fear, they willingly offer themselves up as his slaves. It's a massive contrast. The brothers are bracing for a harsh tyrant seeking revenge, but what does Joseph actually do? Well, the text tells us he wept when they spoke to him. And he doesn't weep from grief this time. He weeps because his brothers still just don't understand his heart. They still think he operates on the world's standard currency of revenge, completely missing the radical transformation that has happened in his soul. Which brings us to Section 3, Evil Transformed for Good. This is really about the incredible power of forgiveness. Here, Joseph makes the conscious choice to step back and ask them, am I in the place of God? This is the ultimate relinquishing of the right to get even. When someone wrongs us deeply, our very first instinct is to play the judge, the jury, and the executioner, right? But Joseph actively steps down from the judge's seat. Comforting his brothers here is exactly like canceling a massive unpayable debt. He wipes their slate completely clean. He tells them, do not fear, and promises to take care of them and their children. Imagine someone utterly destroying your life, and years later, when you have the legal right and power to crush them, you instead give them an all-expenses-paid livelihood. He speaks kindly to them, completely replacing their terror with absolute security. He reveals to them that the very evil they committed was actually woven into a much larger purpose to preserve life. He's transforming past trauma into present salvation. This is the big paradigm shift. Notice that Joseph isn't minimizing the abuse. He plainly says, you meant evil against me. He calls it exactly what it is. But he zooms out to see the bigger picture. God hijacked their evil intentions to bring about survival for a massive population during a severe famine. The brothers were playing checkers, but God was playing chess the whole time. Moving into Section 4, Joseph's final legacy. Let's take a hopeful look toward the future as we wrap up this incredible life story. After reconciling entirely with his family, Joseph lives out the rest of his days in a state of profound peace and immense blessing. The text gives us this beautiful snapshot of what a life well lived actually looks like when it's totally free from the poison of bitterness. He lives to the incredibly old age of 110, witnessing the expansion of his family across multiple generations. Fun fact, in ancient Egyptian culture, 110 was actually considered the absolute ideal lifespan. It was a symbol of a life fully blessed and complete. It represents a life that has reached its peak of wisdom and divine favor. His final actions demonstrate an enduring faith. He makes his brothers swear they will take his bones with them when God eventually brings them back to Abraham's promised land. He gets to see his great-grandchildren, even bouncing the children of Machir on his knees. But his heart is never truly anchored in Egypt. Just as he honored his father's dying wish, he makes his brothers swear that when God visits them and leads them out of Egypt, they won't leave him behind. He dies, is embalmed, and is placed in a coffin in Egypt, a silent, waiting testament to a promise that was yet to be fulfilled. Finally, Section 5, 3 actions for today. Let's apply this ancient wisdom right to your life. Because it's one thing to understand the history of Genesis 50, but it's entirely another to let it actually shape how we live, how we work, and how we relate to our own families today. Let's break down 3 very specific, actionable ways you can apply Joseph's mindset right now. First, be a person of your word. Honor your commitments. If you make a promise, stick to it, no matter the logistical hurdles, just like Joseph did with that massive procession to Canaan. Second, forgive completely. When you forgive, don't keep a ledger. Cancel the debt, wipe the slate clean, and speak kindly to those who have wronged you by stepping down from the judge's seat. And third, trust the bigger picture. When you faced unfair hardships, try to zoom out. Trust that there is a larger, good purpose being woven into your personal story, even if you can't quite see the whole tapestry just yet. So, how can you transform a past hurt into a future good? I really want you to think deeply on that as you go about your day. Is there a grievance you're holding on to that just needs to be released? Is there an opportunity to show grace where someone totally expects you to take revenge? Take a page out of Joseph's book today and be the circuit breaker for generational pain. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to catch our next explainer.